friends. I'm ready for chapter 11 of My Teacher Fried My Brains because this entire time I've been thinking there's no alien. This is just something he made up. I don't know where he's getting this from. I'm thinking, okay, so there was a machine on his head and now he thinks he's smarter just because he had this machine. That's not really true. It's just his imagination. But I don't know. I'm starting to wonder because now we've got a slug that seems to be communicating with him with the word poot. Poot is a question. Poot is a statement. Poot, poot. I'm like, is this slimy thing an alien? I think we're going to have to find out about that. So here we are. Chapter 11, Zap. I concentrated hard, trying to remember everything Miss Jones had done that first time. After all, I sure didn't want to put the machine in reverse and make myself dumber. Finally, I was ready. Leaning one hand on the table next to the generator, I took the crank in my other hand and began to turn it, slowly at first, then faster and faster. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then I felt a familiar sensation, as if a breeze were ruffling my hair. I turned the crank a little faster. My hair stood up. The ants started to crawl around inside my head. I could almost feel myself getting smarter. Now I started to really crank. Come on, machine, I whispered. Come on, baby. Do your stuff. Make me the next Einstein. Sparks of lightning began to flash through my head. Colors seemed to flicker around me. My hand was a blur as it turned the generator's crank faster and faster. Poot! Cried the slug thing in alarm. I thought I smelled something burning. I wanted to stop, but it was as if my hand were on automatic pilot and my brains were too busy getting fried to give it a new order. Zap! That sound, like an enormous spark sizzling through the night, is the last thing I remember. I blacked out and fell to the floor. Duncan! Whispered a voice in my head. Duncan! Wake up! I knew that voice. It belonged to Weird Peter Thompson. But it couldn't be Peter. He was gone, off in space with Broxholm somewhere, which meant that I had to be dreaming, which meant that I was asleep. I tried to wake up. My body didn't cooperate. All right, I'll stay asleep, I thought. Peter's image materialized in my brain, looking just as he had the last time I'd seen him, the night our spring concert, the night Susan had used her piccolo to drive off the alien teacher. It hadn't surprised me that Broxholm couldn't stand the sound of her piccolo. I didn't like it much myself. But I had never quite gotten over the fact that as near as any of us could tell, Peter had chosen to go into space with the alien. I mean, the rest of us were terrified that we were going to get kidnapped. Old Peter couldn't wait to get his butt into that spaceship. Peter Thompson, tall and skinny, his brown eyes lost behind the thickest pair of glasses in the 6th grade. Duncan, he whispered again. Do you remember how many times you beat me up in the last 3 years? I shook my head. In my dream, that is. Lots, said Peter with a nasty smile. Then his face began to change. His skin started to turn green. Pale green first, then darker and darker until it was the color of limes. His eyes stretched out until they looked like butterfly wings, huge and orange. Broxholm, get away from me! I screamed, and then I woke up, which didn't improve things any, because when I opened my eyes, I saw myself staring back at me. Only my face had no color at all, only a pale greenish yellow glow. I blinked. The other me blinked too. I shouted in terror. The other me said, Boot! Yeah! I cried, rolling away. It was the slug thing. It had climbed, crawled, oozed its way to the underside of the lab table where I had landed, where I blacked out. I didn't mind so much that it had been hanging over me, though that was pretty disgusting. What had me worried was the fact that it had imitated my face. I hoped it wouldn't do that when I wasn't around. It would be like an announcement that I had been here. Could the slug only copy something that was in the front of it? Or once it had copied something, would it be able to repeat that image over and over again? Who could tell? It's not like there's been a lot written about the mental ability of alien slugs that live in Tupperware containers kept in the refrigerators of junior high science labs. Of course, that was only one of the important questions I was facing at the moment. The others included A, how was I going to get the slug back into the refrigerator? B, how long had I been asleep? C, had the brain fryer worked? D, if it had worked, just how smart was I? And E, what should I do next? I decided the first thing to do was put the machine back. I was packing it up as I kept an eye out for the slug, which had crawled down from under the lab table and was watching me. I guess you could call it was watching from a spot on Andromeda Jones's desk. "Stay there," I said, trying to sound menacing. "Put!" it replied. I put everything back in place and rolled the cart toward the storage area. As I closed the door, I wondered if the machine had some sort of meter that would let Andromeda Jones keep track of how much brain power it had passed out. I figured I must have gotten smarter, since that wasn't the kind of thing I would have thought of before. Of course, the thought didn't serve any purpose other than to make me nervous, but at least it showed I was thinking. I also wondered if Miss Jones had used the machine on anyone else, and I wondered why she had used it on me. I didn't think it was out of the goodness of her alien heart. That thought made me really nervous. It also convinced me that I had done the right thing. If Miss Jones had fried my brains as part of some alien experiment, the best thing I could do to protect myself would be to get smarter as fast as I could. I stopped and closed my eyes. How much smarter was I? It was hard to tell. I didn't really have any way to test it, and the last brain fry had taken a while to really have an effect. I did feel a tingling in my skull. Maybe the machine had stimulated my brain so that it was growing new synapses or something. I blinked. Why in the world did I know a word like synapses? Must be the brain fryer had worked after all, except I couldn't figure out where I'd found the word to begin with. Was the thing putting new information into my head, like those subliminal messages and records that people keep worrying about? I shivered. "I'll think about it tomorrow," I said to myself, just like Scarlett O'Hara. I blinked. It was happening again. Other than Make My Day, I'd never quoted a movie from a book before. Where was this stuff coming from? Never mind. I had to get out of the lab. No more fooling around. I grabbed the Tupperware container and its lid and headed for the slug. "Inside," I ordered, holding the container in front of it. "Pooh?" it replied, sounding pitiful. "Inside," I repeated, trying to sound fierce. It made a little pooty sigh, then slumped forward and oozed into the container. I slipped on the cover, then sighed to myself. Remembering how my mother used these things, I pressed the edges of the lid in place, then pushed down the center to get rid of the extra air. This is called burping the Tupperware. Only the sound that came out was a tiny poot. I put the container back into the refrigerator, which reminded me that I still hadn't had anything to eat. Stomach grumbling, I stared around the room. As far as I could tell, everything was back in place. Now to head for home, I thought. I decided to put on my sneakers. I figured that with the amount of screaming I had done already, if there had been anyone else in the building, they would have caught me by now anyway. Even so, I walked quietly. Being alone at night in a building where you don't really belong will do that to you. Also, I still had a slight fear that the alien was going to jump out and nab me. That might not have made much sense, but you lived through what I had lived through in the previous few days and tell me how much sense you make. I went to one of the back doors since I didn't want some late-night driver who happened to be passing by to spot me slipping out of the building. The moon had disappeared behind a cloud. Its absence made the sky darker and the stars brighter. I looked up into the darkness and wondered which of those points of light Andromeda Jones called home. As I stood there staring into the night, I suddenly remembered that there was a constellation called Andromeda. Was that where she had gotten her fake human name? Pretty nervy of her. Of course, it was pretty odd for me to remember the name of any constellation, but I barely noticed that fact. I guess I was already getting used to being smarter. I walked around the school. The grass was soaked with dew, and so were my sneakers by the time I got to the front of the building. I could hear crickets singing in the distance. I like being out in the night. The time is quiet and private, and you can feel more like yourself than you do in the daylight. I heard the town clock begin to chime. 2 hours past midnight. I figured I'd better get moving. I had only walked a couple of blocks when a car pulled up beside me, and a deep voice said, "Get in, Duncan."